Right, it is 6 p.m. my time, and therefore we are beginning. So, first up we have Eduardo, and Eduardo has drawn a samurai on a horse, leaving his home to adventure off and do whatever it is that he has to do. So that's quite fun. Let's see what else he's written about it. He's just supposed to be leaving for Dawn at War. The idea of the assignment is that it tells some kind of story. Just contains multiple story elements. So I think the way that I'd want to think about approaching critiquing something that's meant to contain lots of different story elements is whether or not I can tell what the story is that's going on. Okay. How complex of a story that is. I'm a little PNG tuber now. Yeah, I made this little guy as a meme the other day, and maybe he'll get developed more. Maybe he needs a body. I don't know. I need to screen share this to the Discord. Okay, so the thing that I'm missing here is, so it's samurai, and he's going somewhere. And that's it. That's all I get. So in terms of storytelling, I think it's lacking, right? Where is he going? It used to be when I did an A level in English literature, you'd have all these questions. So it would be what, which you've answered, samurai. It's like where, why, how, when. Some of these again, like when, okay, it's feudal Japan, we get that. How is he going somewhere? Well, on horseback, but I feel like this how is really where a lot of the magic happens, so it's not just how is he going somewhere, it's like how is he sat, and what does that say? What's the horse doing? Is it like a really fresh, new horse, or does it look like it's been starved, and or his village is very poor, maybe, and that's why he has to go to war. That would be a separate story that you would tell. How rich is this samurai? Is he actually a noble samurai, or have we got some kind of like Mulan situation where it's someone that's stolen a family member's armor and is posing as a samurai? Like, that would be a completely different story. And some of these other options are probably a little bit more interesting. I think a samurai on a horse, I would not describe as a story. It's something. And you can do a cool painting of a samurai on a horse. There's nothing stopping you doing that. It's just you're not telling me a story. Now in your original, I can see the foot still here. There was at least like another person here who's like praying for them as they go off to war. Now that's kind of interesting, right? So that I feel like this exaggerates this idea that they're leaving home is actually if they're leaving someone or multiple people behind. Maybe these two are like holding hands and consoling each other about the fact that their son has to go off to war or something. But we just need more stuff. Part of the idea that we need more stuff is that maybe we need to view it in a higher level of fidelity, right? So just the level of detail that we have drawn doesn't tell me whether or not this is a strong or an emaciated horse. Like, we don't have any facial features on the samurai themselves. We don't know if they look determined or really worried or really happy that they're going off and leaving home, like they're going on an adventure. Like, just the facial features that would be here would describe so much of the story. We don't have that. We can't tell the quality of the armor particularly. Is it handmade? Is it really, really lavish and crazy? Is it like rusted and old, like it hasn't been used in forever? Same thing with, I mean, the horse doesn't even have a saddle, so the horse needs a saddle. You know, it needs all the other stuff that goes in a horse. I'm not sure on Japanese war horses, but I assume they have some kind of stirrup, considering that was invented in Mongolia. So all that kind of stuff, even like the banner on the samurai, which is maybe the way that we would recognize their family or clan. You've sort of got as this little slither up here. You know, should it be that the banner is much more visible as we're going off? So story-wise, just more stuff, more little hints here and there of the story that you want to tell. I don't know how helpful that is. In terms of drawing, there are a couple of things that are really quite alarming. So, perspective-wise, if we just follow these lines back, it would seem to me that this horse is at least, if not taller than this entire part of the building. You know, it's possible that the Japanese samurai is sat on top of a Dutch farming draft horse, but I don't think it's going to be the case. In fact, I think Japanese horses were a little bit smaller than the kind that we use in Europe. So, perspective is maybe a problem, just the scale of these elements. Even the scale of the samurai compared with the horse seems very, very tall. I mean, if the samurai was stood here, maybe the top of his head would be the height of the horse's back. How are you going to climb onto that in full armor? It just doesn't make any logical sense. The pose of some of this stuff. So he's sort of leaning. He's going to fall off the horse. I'm not sure if you've ridden a horse before, Eduardo. I'm not sure if you're in the VC yet, or if you're still running a little bit late. You can watch the recording. But when you ride a horse, you only need to sort of lean one way or another a little bit, and then all of a sudden you start slipping out of the saddle and then falling over. If this is our horse. There you go. So playing around with actually the lean of it. I think these are all things that we can do, but ultimately you need to decide on the story you want to tell before you tell it, and the story that you want to tell you need to figure out in higher fidelity. So it's not even just the drawing. We can describe these things and we can just use words to do it without drawing. And that's just as good. So the story that you are telling is leaving for war at dawn. Well, what's the indicator that it's dawn? If that's an important part of the story, what's the indicator that it's the morning? And even then, leaving for war at dawn. Happily leaving, more adjectives and adverbs. Leaving for war at dawn, and it's very sad. Leaving for war at dawn, because he wants revenge on a rival clan member or something. There are loads of different ways to spin that, and I think the more specific you can get, the better. Otherwise, the story you're pursuing is going to be generic, and by virtue of that, the image might be reasonably generic. But I think it's okay. Right. This next one. The screen share is just showing recent artworks of Photoshop. Does that work? Is it still... I'll just share my entire screen on Discord. Right, the next one... Oh, actually, Faye snuck in an artwork that I didn't notice. So we'll pull this in. Sorry, whoever that was. We'll have a look at this first. Let's have a read. You're looking for character design feedback for this D&D character you made. She's a tiefling star druid and can transform into 3 different constellation forms. Okay.
And I also I think I forgot to mention this when writing it, but she's supposed to be like a dancer for a circus.
Oh, that's fun. See, that's a fun idea.
It's what I mainly do. It's what I spend most of my time on.
Thinking up fun D&D ideas.
Pretty much.
Okay, let's. And you just want any feedback at all?
Any feedback on maybe like if it reads well, if it can understand what like the character is supposed to be like, because I know what your job is, so
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm trying to. So this is literally what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, it reads well. I think I would look at it and think that it's. I mean, the constellation stuff is obvious enough.
Yeah.
So's the exotic dancer stuff. That's obvious. And based on the form, they get different weapons. I mean, archer, the weapon is clear.
Yeah.
I think the feedback that I'd have is I don't know what these glowy hands
that's
are,
true.
and I don't know what this ball
for
is.
Chalice, it's supposed to be healing, and for Dragon, it's just supposed to be wise. Like they get more intelligent and wise with the Dragon transformation.
Okay, I think maybe the transformations could be more dramatic, because they're transforming into different constellations. You know, one of the features of a constellation is that it's wildly different to another constellation. So you might have a constellation that looks like that. And you might also have, is it Taurus? That's like the big V. Right, those are hugely different. The only difference really that I'm seeing between these is the color and the thing that they're holding. Is that fair?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, potentially Archer. Well, when they go into their Archer constellation form, could they get more sort of sharp, sneaky shapes going on? It seems like something quite magical is happening. So is it conceivable that actually more of the 3D form could change as well?
That makes sense.
To suit that, you know, could actually they get a bit of a larger upper torso to use this crazy bow, and you know, could their hair fall down as if it's almost like a hood or something? So they're adopting more of the typical sort of rogue look. And then, like, if this is healing, to me this is very sort of demonic and evil. It's that kind of pink
Okay.
that I wouldn't associate with something good. I look at this, maybe it's the glowing eyes. I think the other thing is because it's a tiefling, it's got these big sharp horns,
Yeah.
but also that the hair is going in something a very sharp way. So when you're looking at the different sort of alternate variations of the same character, things like hair and clothing are going to be really useful because, well, maybe you want pointy shapes for dragon and pointy shapes for archer, but maybe actually when they're in the hair form, the hair is much more, when they're in the healing form, the hair is much more sort of flowy and soft, right? The same thing with some of the fabric. Like, could this be more rounded, friendly shape that make this seem more like a character that is going to help you and heal you? I hope that makes sense. The other thing that I would probably do is
I was playing around a lot of colors, and I asked a lot of my friends for feedback on the colors.
yeah, it's weird because I'm thinking about pushing it more towards like a traditional red.
Let me find it. I also had like a yellow version of it of the transformation. I'll drop that in feedback as well.
I think most people associate healing, especially in games, with red or green, depending on whether you're looking at like life points.
I just put the yellow one on feedback as well.
I'll have a look at that. Yeah, that's nice. The yellow is kind of a bit softer. Even that pose, which is this one over here, isn't it? But that is a pose that I
made first.
Yeah, that is a pose that might be more appropriate for like a calm. But I suppose it depends on how aggressively they wanna heal people, right? It could go crazy with it. But I want you to play around with more of the physical transformations that are going on.
It didn't even occur to me. It's just now that you mentioned it, it makes a lot of sense.
Because like could it be that when they go into dragon form, they're literally harnessing the power of a constellation, right? Could those
Yeah, that's
like
what
those
it's
horns
described
get
as in the
right? So could those horns
power
get
system.
even bigger, and can we exaggerate them because it's the dragon form, and maybe actually the the cloak begins to sort of furl around in one direction, like
Maybe
it's
it forms into like a
a
little dragon
tail or
tail.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like Archer
Yeah,
would be
I think
more
I think I was
stealthy
thinking
or
of this as
something.
one character design when it's actually like 4 characters that I'm designing,
Yeah, and
and just now I'm realizing that.
it also kind of depends on the lore that you want to go for, right? So is it that the constellation is literally like taking them over, or is it that they are harnessing it?
It could be either way depending on how I decide to play it. In D&D, normally it would be that you harness the power of the constellation, but I don't mind the idea of role playing as them getting taken over by this constellation.
If I think if I were to have healing power, I would want it to be softer. Like you actually want to be touched by the healing beams, and you're not gonna get lasered to death or something. Like a slow pulsing out from the. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the main thing. There are a couple of funky looking drawing things that are going on.
Hit me with it.
We can talk
I'm
about.
ready.
So
Ready for the perspective, all the shapes,
the
everything.
perspective isn't awful. The perspective's okay.
First time.
That is weird. Like the where it meets the elbow, this arm is getting infinitely thin and like squeezed by
I
something,
see that.
and then it's like bulging out there and then going back in. And then maybe you could just get a little bit more specific or descriptive with the hands, because this is a bit of a. This is like schlop. This is hand schlop.
It was a sketch that I turned into an artwork because I was trying to just figure out the.
Yeah. It's
character.
fine. It's fine. Similar thing here that I'm not sure. Is this meant to be? This almost feels like a bicep, but on the forearm or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So playing around with that, I think. Just get up a reference and draw it with a reference. To me, the idea that this armpit is going in and is immediately coming back out as the back probably isn't what you're going to see happen. So it might be that you have here's a body, and you might have the back going down into the waist and the stomach or whatever. And your armpit's probably going to be much lower down than you think. Right, and there's a lot of overlap between the armpit and the arm. So what's probably going to happen is actually the back is going to go behind all of this, and then your armpit is going to go in there. But it would require you to widen some of this, and I understand that you've stylized it in a particular way. So that's no problem. I'm also tempted to maybe give characters a little bit more belly, but that's the style you've gone for. This foot I want to talk about.
Oh boy, the feet.
Well, because this leg tracks. Like I can understand how we arrive at this leg. This leg is infinitely longer than the other leg, and then when it gets here, the heel is still touching the ground. I think the only way that you excuse this leg being so far away is because it's on an angle that the heel would be off the ground, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Which is a bit dodgy.
That's better.
Yeah. So just remember that I always think about doing math classes as a child, and thinking about right-angled triangles, and this idea that is it the hypotenuse is the diagonal line, and the diagonal line always has to
I
travel further
don't
than every
remember.
other line. So if you have a vertical and a horizontal and then a diagonal, the diagonal is going further than the
Yeah.
horizontal, and that's
Okay.
this literally what's happening with your leg. You have a vertical and horizontal, and then the diagonal is going further than this one, and so it can't do that. You can't just stretch a leg. Yeah. Yeah, the rest of it's fun. It's a really fun concept, so it's just developing it a little bit further,
Yeah.
playing around with those different, because you've given yourself, it's like you've given yourself the dream brief of, I have ultimate creative freedom, and this can be anything I want it to be once it goes into this constellation form.
Yeah, I think I was thinking I genuinely, because you saying that just got me to realize it's literally three other characters that I could design instead of just designing one and just adding like a shader on top of it.
Yeah, yeah, and so play around with it. Like you've given yourself the opportunity. Now you have to use the opportunity and have fun.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Feshko glug 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 is also saying that healing is definitely more green. I wonder if archery would be, if healing would be green, what color would archery be?
Because everyone said, okay, wait. If you want to, I can post all of the colors that I played around with. Because I played around with a lot of colors.
You can if you want.
Most of them are already used. So there was the blue, the red, the green, the yellow, and I also had a black and a white one. But I wasn't sure if I would use the black and white one because if they felt like they should be special,
Yeah,
on their own
yeah. I think
things.
black and white aren't gonna work with everything else. Maybe archery should be yellow, and healing should be green. I don't know. I don't mind healing as pink or like a reddy pink. I don't
I
mind
asked
it.
like four different people, and four different people said that archery should be green for some reason.
Maybe because they associate it with like
The superhero,
no, like
Green Arrow, maybe.
forest rangers and
Oh,
like
it might be,
elves
yeah.
and nature and yeah, it's pretty green, isn't it? Right, oh,
Well, thank you so much.
you're welcome. Next is from Loon, who says you'd like some critique on this. You know that the proportions are a bit squashed, but you didn't have the patience to finish all the scaly bits. That's fine. You'd like crit on a stylized version on it. You tried to keep the lighting consistent, but you rotated it so it's a different angle. Okay. I think this is an edges problem. So what we've got here is this feels spherical, right? So we've got this rib cage thing that's, you know, however it's coming down, it's almost certainly rounded. You know, this is coming around this form, and because it's rounded, all of those highlights and reflections are scattered in a soft way. They transition from one place to another, or at the very least, if they are a hard reflection, the hard reflection travels around the rest of it. But what you've done is you've gone, well, there's an angle here at the top, which I agree is coming to that sort of crisp point. And you've applied that everywhere. You've said everything is a straight line and a hard angle. And it makes everything feel much less round. So if we just take the colors that you've already got, but we get like a round brush. Maybe we round it out even more. I'd be tempted to go a little bit darker. You know, I think immediately this is beginning to read as a bit more round. So this is like primitive shape 101. Which is just viewing things as their individual shapes. Even when I'm painting a head, and maybe we'll do it with a head as an example. I'm I'm probably going to start with this very simple approximation of a sphere, right? And now I can start cutting back into that. And I can say, well, actually, this top edge is a little bit sharper. But I'm keeping it a lot more simple than you probably are. You know, does it have a bit of a highlight down here? You know, now that might go into whatever else as it goes around. We can play with that all we like. But in essence, it's a round thing. You can imagine making this into a helmet or a breastplate or anything else. But keeping that initial rounded form in mind is important. And I would literally draw a placeholder sphere there and then paint on top like this. I don't think there's a need to overcomplicate it for yourself and not give yourself that sphere to paint over or think about in the first place. The other kind of main problem that I see happening with this, which it might be part of the fact that you're viewing this from a perfect front-on angle, is that things are beginning to lack thickness. I won't say edges. Thickness. Things are beginning to lack thickness. So as this metal plate wraps around and goes towards the back, at the moment you've drawn it as though it's almost infinitely thin. It's got a little crisp highlight on the edge. But it's quite a thick metal plate, right? And so should that have something like this to say, look, it has a big thick edge as it goes round? Yeah, I think so. How is this part of the chest plate sat on top of this stomach? Does that need some kind of edge underneath it just to mark off how thick it is? I can see you're kind of doing it, but just push it a little bit more. Same thing like this part. It's coming up on the pauldron. Well, that has thickness. That's going to have thickness. For this pauldron, can we just... Same thing again. But we'll erase this other stuff. But I'm still just going to treat it like... Like it's that same sphere, but it's just a section of that sphere. So hopefully you can see how I've done that. And then I think you're doing a good job of scattering on some of this textury stuff on top to make that pattern read. But yeah, the next point for it, I think you said you were going for something a bit stylized, which is maybe why you've gone for something very angular, but I don't think going for a very angular thing works well for this. I don't think it's a style that is going to work in your favor. Like, in theory, you can do whatever style you want, but I wouldn't try and describe this kind of armor if I were producing an episode of South Park. Like, it's not going to work with that style. Some styles just aren't going to be compatible with the things that you want to describe within them. Some things are more suitably described in specific styles. Hopefully that makes sense. So, no, I would begin to describe the roundness of this stuff. Maybe you want to stylize that in a sense that you still want those hard edges. Okay, you can, but the hard edges have to travel round that form to emphasize that roundness. And we can play around with color. Maybe that's more of an important element in the style that you want to exploit. It could be cool. But yeah, giving things edges, making things appropriately round. I like this as a study. I think this is good. This is fun. Notably, you've expanded the width of the shoulders and things, probably because you're imagining that someone's actually wearing this, whereas this version has no one in there, so there's no arms or whatever. So you could even say that yours looks better, right? Yours looks like there could be a soldier inside. So I think that's fun. Some of these other bits and pieces you've just done as like 2D at the moment, but even if you're just going to do it in like a couple of brush strokes or a couple of shapes, you know, a shape that actually comes off of the silhouette is going to be more useful than a shape that sits flat on it like it's drawn on or painted on. I'm just having fun painting this. I think you've done a nice job. But yeah, I think that's that. We'll put this in feedback and we'll move on. I didn't skip yours, Eduardo. I did it before you joined. So I will show you it now. This is the horse. The feedback will be in the video. The main thing with it is just that there isn't a story, so the story is too simplistic to be a story, if that makes sense. Like, sure, your story can be man stood in front of house, but it's not a story that anyone's going to be interested in. So, but if you do man stood in front of house that he was just evicted from, or man stood in front of house that he just bought using illicit drug money, it gets more interesting, and there are ways that we can begin to think about visually describing that stuff. So what I was talking about here was, is it just samurai leaving for war at dawn? Is he happy about it? Is he sad? Is he doing it because he wants revenge? Is he doing it because he's been conscripted? Is he young? Is he old? Like, those kind of markers we could get in his pose. Wouldn't it be really interesting if actually it's like an 80-year-old samurai that's been called up for conscription because they're desperate for soldiers? That'd be an interesting story, and you could get that through him hunched over, and through maybe it's a really old horse as well that he's had all of his life, something like that. So yeah, those are the main pointers, but you can watch the video and see the rest of the feedback.
Thanks, Joe. That's very interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, it's just before you even put your pencil to paper, like the conception of the story happens outside of the canvas, right? You can do that in your head before you even start drawing.
Better to do it in your head, I guess.
Well, not necessarily better, but it is something you can do, but because you've committed to quite a serious sort of perspective drawing, we're trying to figure out all this stuff, and so if you just you're putting in a whole lot of effort into something that might not be particularly interesting in the first place. So come up with an interesting idea and then describe that. I think would work better for you.
Perfect. And what I got was that it seems like you're giving it color, right? It's not like samurai. It's this specific samurai with this specific.
Yeah, emotion. Yeah. It's going one step deeper. Would you watch a film that is just samurai going to war? I think there would have to be more of just more interest in that character. Yeah. Who is it? What's their backstory? Do they have any relationships that we should be interested about? What are their motivations? Like, we're following this character. I want to know more about them, and I want you to describe that visually, but you can't even begin to draw and describe it visually unless you know what it is that you're describing. So
great. Thanks, man.
You're welcome. Next, I can't see your username because I'm in streamer mode, but you have drawn a hand as part of practice. You wanted to try and bring yourself to more of a finished state than your regular pieces, but you don't quite know how to approach it further. Also, you're at a loss when it comes to rendering the hairs on the arm. Okay. So, this is really nice as is. You want to push it further, but I don't know if I would if I were to push it further, I would just take it away from your style and make it more my style. So the way that I would begin to push it further is by refining or changing edges, thinking about edges. And I would say, you know, maybe there are some edges that should be hard, but actually maybe there are some edges that could be soft. Okay, we can start to smooth areas out and think about why some areas are smoother than others, how quickly the form is turning around this. Is some of that like going to get caught on ridges and wrinkles and whatever else? So that's how I would start to refine it. I might exaggerate some of the what am I doing? Some of the sort of subsurfacey stuff on the fingers, that glow, that soft glow, that I think is pretty interesting. I think I'd probably start working in more cools. Everything's very, very warm when I look at my own hand, because veins are so close to the surface, especially on areas like the knuckles. I think we get more cools. And notice I'm still well within the sort of red, warm hues. It's just I've decreased the saturation, and that almost makes it, you know, feel like it's blue weirdly. So maybe we take this and we decrease the saturation a little bit more, and we're getting some cools in there. Down by the wrist, is that getting cooler or warmer? Well, on the inside it's getting cooler. I have a lot of veins there. So, you know, what's happening with this stuff? Where else on my hand? Just bits and bobs. But yeah, you can see the problem with this is this is the style that you've painted it in, and I'm just making it like a Joe painting. So take that advice with a pinch of salt. I'm not sure if you're interested in going further with the edges, or if you want to keep it hard edged, sorry, and play around more with those shapes. Certainly though, I think the inclusion of cools and warms would vary it up a little bit more. The warms actually feel even warmer when there's an addition of something cold next to it, so that's quite fun. The arm hair, rendering the hairs on the arms. Well, there's a couple of things happening in the reference. Like, actually, you know, part of the arm here is getting darker as it turns around. Hairs, because they're transparent, I would probably begin to paint softer rather than something perfectly hard. So, you know, I might envisage them as softer marks. And then I might overlay some kind of scattery. Let's do it smaller. Some kind of scattery texture. You'll notice the hairs are getting cooler as well. But again, on the reference, you're getting this part of the arm that's getting really quite dark. And quite cool. So I think we could get that in. Something really cool is happening here. Let's see if we can describe it in a way that everyone else will understand. So if I have a curved surface, and on the curved surface there are little hairs that pop out. Let's say they just pop out perfectly vertically for now. Then when they're pointed at me, they're going to seem like they're less densely scattered, right? But the more these turn around a form, the more they begin to overlap. And as they overlap, even though individually they're pretty translucent, you actually get this sort of halo around something hairy, like on the edge, where it's getting darker and then brighter towards the center. So So you almost get like an outline. You know, as these things get towards that edge, we get like the hair coming off of the silhouette and coming back round. It's like a little kiwi. I like kiwis. Kiwis are tasty. Can't give my mum a kiwi though. She's deathly allergic. Okay, we've only got one left to critique. So if there are 5 people on the Streamlabs, on the OBS, on the YouTube, if you wanna join the Discord, or if you're already in the Discord, just pop something in for feedback. Because otherwise it feels like we're going to finish quite quickly today. Next is this character. Mr. Tom Hicks, famous concept artist Tom Hicks, has posted something for feedback. That's fun. We'll await that. This character just says feedback on the anatomy. So... I think the legs are a problem, but we'll talk about that in a second. It feels like the head is a little bit small to me. You know, we can sort of fit the face in this tiny little box. If we're going by those anatomy standards that quite a few artists tend to use, which is like how many heads can you fit in a figure? And we do actually measure figures that way when we do life drawing and things. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 heads in a figure is like taller than anyone I've ever met or ever drawn. They've got elf ears, so maybe you're going for someone that's like insanely tall. But I think that elves are not. They're sort of stylishly tall. And they're tall compared with other races like dwarves and halflings and things, but they're not like freakishly tall. They're not in like P.T. Barnum level giants of people. So 10 heads is too many heads. The way you fix this is just by making your original head bigger. Let's talk about the legs a little bit. So they are, you know, their feet are facing outwards quite dramatically. I think that the problem with this is that the rest of their leg isn't doing that. Their torso is facing that way. So if we follow this down to the ground, like that is the midpoint, right? And so even if you want their feet to face out in different directions, that would mean that this foot faces out like that. And then this one would still face or seem to face forward from this angle, right? So because their whole body is already faced in one way, this facing all the way out there is kind of insane. So there you go. That's that. These pants, it's not exactly anatomy, but it kind of ties in. They're very rigid looking, so I gather that the idea you're trying to get is that we have a belt, and actually the belt is doing something like this. And then we have the knees. Let's do something like this. We can even say, then we've got our feet. Right. And so you got to think about how this cloth is figuring out. And so it has things called anchor points. So wherever it's held, we can imagine that these are anchor points. And so the cloth's held up here. And from those points, it's going to fall down. Right? Imagine how like a towel sort of droops down. And it's falling down, but here where it's tucked into the pants is also an anchor point. And so it sort of falls down into these pants and then curves back up where it's held up. Right? And so you're getting these sort of teardrop shapes that make this feel much more like it's fabric that's falling on its own weight and then being supported by something at the bottom. And actually, if the draping fabric of the pants overlaps the boots a little bit more, then I mean it's visually interesting and it exaggerates that droop. So this being a perfectly straight line is incredibly rigid and makes it feel like something that is not cloth. It's not drapery, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So main things is bigger head, direction of the legs. You should always be aware of the direction that your limbs are going in. And then actually I feel like it's not very natural. It's very stiff. Another thing that's quite stiff is just the legs themselves. You can see it as I'm sort of drawing the legs down here. I'm getting those curved, natural rhythms of something going on. Whereas again, you have this like perfectly straight front of the shoe, perfectly straight side of the shoe. It doesn't feel quite right. The next thing I'd like to talk about, I think the last thing I'd like to talk about, is contrapposta and how we naturally stand with our legs. So here's my mannequin 1. A mannequin 1 is going to be stood as you've got your character stood. Something like that. Right? And so if we were to draw a line through like the shoulders and the hips, that line would be just perfectly horizontal. And again, it makes something very stiff. You might want something very stiff if you're going for like a soldier, right? Or a guard, a palace guard. But I think this is a much more, again, flowy, drapery covered character. And so we want to do something called contrapposta. So these shoulder lines and the hip lines, let's just angle one of them one way and angle the other one another way. And it's only slight, right? It's only a tiny little thing. But then we have something like that, right? And then the side of the pelvis that's higher up, we're gonna have our leg on that one that supports the weight. And you can see because it supports the weight, that whole leg is coming in. And then you can kind of do whatever you want with the other leg. So the important thing is that this foot is below the head almost perfectly. And because it's below the head, it's on that center of mass, that center line. As you imagine a plumb line. And so this leg could go backwards, it could go out and back, it could even go like up and back. You know, we could just rest it like that with the heel up. And then this arm is already up, ready to get that, and this arm is already down, ready to rest on the hip. So getting that more natural posing. I mean, maybe we emphasize that even more. And actually this leg I'm tempted to just have it come straight out or something. But yeah. Yeah, that'll do. Mr. Thomas Hicks, concept art extraordinaire. Welcome. This is very nice. I think it's missing the Tom Hicks flair. And the Tom Hicks flair is something like that. Some kind of big graphic or number that adds some kind of it's like a really simple storytelling element that I think everyone loves and is so easy to do, because all of a sudden it's no longer a random unnamed unspecified spaceship going anywhere. It's spaceship 002 and we want to know where it goes, and it's got a story and a history. What happened to spaceship 001? Even better if you can put like a now it's Swedish. Doesn't have to be Swedish, but like flags and stuff. People like flag. It could be a made-up flag. I think that'd be okay. In terms of the image itself, it's lovely. It's really lovely. Maybe more of the Greebly stuff can show itself down here. So part of what makes the Greebly stuff up here so successful is that it's some kind of an indication of scale, and it makes this look very big. But can we go even further with that down here? Like, can we still have Greebly stuff, but it's, you know, it's barely visible at all. Can there be more of these lines, but they're just really, really thin and really, really tiny levels of detail. I feel like this bit feels a little bit flat. The clouds are cool. They are fine. But I know you, and you're actually quite the painter. So these are pretty. There's a decent chunk of 3D. There's a decent chunk of like displacement maps. The clouds obviously are a photo currently. I think what I would really love to see personally is you getting all that crisp, sharp 3D and then contrasting it with some kind of really atmospheric, brushwork centric, like the sort of John Park studies that you used to do. And getting something with a lot of motion in there that contrasts a lot of the hard surface stuff. It's kind of like when people design big hard surface skyscrapers and then they put like some nice shrubbery at the bottom because it contrasts. You named this one like the Cloud Scraper or something, as far as I remember. And so could this thing be interacting with the clouds a little bit more? If it's just docking, does it like make clouds? Could it be that it's, you know, its exhaust is producing some kind of vapor trail or something because it's just come from a load of clouds? I don't know. But that interaction I think would be cool. But yeah, that. Another thing that I forgot to mention as I was painting this over is just how atmospheric perspective works, because I feel like this is something that's misunderstood a bit. I don't think you've misunderstood it here. I just think you've made a stylized artistic decision that looks like the same misunderstanding that I see everywhere else. Which is that when something gets further back in atmosphere, it's the shadows that get filled with the atmospheric light, right? So it's always going to be the shadow that picks up light from the atmosphere, light from the ambient light in your scene. Things that are hit by direct light are still going to be just as bright. you have, I assume, a sun on this planet that is beaming down light at everything at the same angle. It's going to be just as bright over here, even though it's a couple of 100 meters away, as it is on your spaceship, because the light source is just so powerful. And we're seeing it through atmosphere, but when it's not like we're seeing it through like a thick layer of green fog. And if we were, that would affect the foreground a bit more. So, yeah, the shadows are going to get green and disappear completely, but the parts that are in light are still going to be in light. It's the same thing for mountains, and trees, and buildings, and anything else. It's just the shadow, mostly, that gets affected by atmospheric perspective. Now, it's different if it's fog or dust, something like that, but I don't think that's what you were going for. So, bringing in some of the light from those shadows is, from those clouds is, I think, a good idea. Does anyone else want any feedback? It's been a quiet one. It's been a very quiet one. If anyone else wants feedback, then speak now. Join the Discord now. Send off some work. Or forever hold your peace. Ellie, you've joined. Would you like some feedback?
Ooh. No, I'm just here for.
We've ran out. We've ran out of people to critique.
We've
finished them all an hour early. Not many people wanted critique today. I can just end it here and go and get my dinner. I was just wondering if anyone else wanted any feedback.
You're all good, man. Hit the showers.
I'm gonna get myself some mackerel salad. Should be as gross as it sounds. Needs must. Right. Okay. I'll be back next week. So give everyone a chance to recharge. You're welcome. So enjoy. That was a nice quick 1 hour